Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of Data Unchained. I'm your host, Molly Presley. I want to talk a little bit about what this podcast is about before introducing today's guest. Data Unchained is all about how the paradigm for data access has changed. In today's decentralized world, getting data to remote workers, distributed applications, things like artificial intelligence engines is really a challenge. And with the introduction of the cloud, things got even more complicated while they were getting a lot more exciting as well. Data Unchained digs into the challenges as well as the solutions that make data an asset as a global resource. So first, I'd like to introduce today's guest. Ludo is a longtime contact and I think familiar to a lot of you in the industry. He's the CEO of TrackIt, a cloud integration partner with AWS. Ludo, thank you so much for joining today.
Hey everyone, thank you for having me.
And Ludo, before we get started and kind of dig into today's topics, would you talk a little bit about yourself personally? I know you have a long, deep software development background, and then also tell us a little bit about TrackIt.
Sure. So I moved in the US like 14 years ago, actually, from France. You heard it from my accent. And so as a software engineer for DDN, where I met you, Molly. And
Yes.
So as a software engineer, I was very deep, already interested in AWS. So it was very early time of AWS. A few years later, I decided to start my own company focusing on AWS and doing system integration on AWS.
So how are things different in the types of software that you need to write for a company like DDN, who's super high performance parallel file systems, and AWS?
At the end of the day, software is still software. So just like the building blocks are totally different of what we used to have 15 years ago than what we have today, or even because AWS was already there 15 years ago. And one of the first QA system for one web object storage was running on AWS at that time for QA purpose. But the building blocks available, they were very tiny on AWS. Now, we have a lot of more high-level services who can solve a lot of complexity in your development. So I think at the end of the day, as a software engineer, it's still the same, just you have way more tools than what you used to have 15 years ago.
So we're getting ready to pack up our bags and head off to reInvent when this episode releases. When you and I were talking about getting ready for this podcast, one of the things I thought was a really important point is there's so much happening at AWS and at the other clouds as well, but you just think about what Amazon is able to produce and release every single year. What is your approach when you go to reInvent or when you're starting to try to understand all the capabilities Amazon is releasing at an AWS show?
It really depends what is your goal, because the first few times I went to reInvent, the first time I think was 2014, and so it was what do I want to do? Do I want to meet people? It's a great place to meet people. Very high quality people are at reInvent. I think the best of the ecosystem. Or do you want to learn new technology? Because I think it's a great place also to learn. So it really depends what is your goal going there. And you should go there. It's a great place. But for engineers, you have great session, from 101 type of session, very basic, where you can learn anything about EC2 or about this new AI ML service if you want. Or you can go very deep with 400 type of session in very what is under the cover of a specific service, or how to optimize a media pipeline, for example, or anything.
It's interesting that there's so many specialties, and Amazon has definitely invested in a lot of sessions to do continuing education, even fresh out of college education. But when you think about where skill sets come from to run services in the cloud, or maybe run a hybrid cloud, where do you find that people are typically getting those? Is it something that's a fairly available skill set now? Is it difficult to find?
Well, it's not easy to find because AWS or any cloud is so broad, and it depends where you are, what you want to build, how you want to build it. Because as we talked before, like AWS is really like Lego blocks. And you can just, what type of engineering organization are you? So are you like Netflix, Instagram, or Twitter type of organization where you can build everything you want from scratch, and like you have the vision, you don't need any step-by-step guide. You know what you want. You know you need like 1,000 red blocks with like few plates and few wheels. So that it's where you go. And so you have that type of organization where they are very deep and they have the organization. After that, you have like people who need the step-by-step guide. And so like they are just follow the guideline. And so usually they call partner like TrackIt to help them. And you have also some organization where they are more like they need like the Star Wars Falcon set already built, and it's what they expect. And it's the same with AWS. You can, and today AWS is providing that type of services. So to answer your question, it really depends where you are in your cloud journey. If you are more like the people getting like stuff already built because you don't want to spend cycle, you want to go fast to market, I think it's exactly the same way you used to approach IT before. And in the opposite way, if you really want to build from scratch because you have like a very specific challenge to do, like in that case, you really need to learn what software to use with AWS, how to build it, how to design it, and how to run it. So, and it's a lot of knowledge to get there.
What is the role of IT in all of this? I think back to, when I first started in this field, and IT pretty much went out and assessed the technologies available. They set up their architecture, the building blocks you were able to use, provisioned off, a bit of storage or, the IP addresses that can access it. And it's kind of controlled, I would say, by IT. Do you still feel that that's the case? Or as people are going out to learn the different ways to deploy in the cloud, has it gotten a lot more broad on what IT's role is?
Yes, it definitely changed with the cloud, with AWS, and not only AWS, but like I think like about some SaaS services. Like so, before you are going to EMC or to HP to get some servers, and it was all under the control of the IT management. But today, like even an intern in a software engineering organization can come building a proof of concept using like a SaaS CDN like Fastly, and using some AWS services. And one day this service go to production, and now IT inherit of something they didn't expect because someone bought Hammerspace on the marketplace, and it's running, it's already in production. So I think like the IT management change a bit, and sometimes you need to put some guardrails, but like we see a lot of migration happening from some specific AWS services or specific third-party services where like at one point you need to consolidate, but it's also a great way to get new technology. And I feel the software engineering team is getting way more power than what they used to have.
And as you think about how you control this and really the role that TrackIt would play as a cloud integrator, I think often people think of you as helping them to deploy technology, essentially take advantage of, gain their data to the technology they want. But do you get involved in the organizational planning of who should be involved on the security side, or what is your role in this whole journey?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like especially like for enterprise customer, because it's so easy to spin up a new AWS service where like, and maybe the organization doesn't want to support it. And yes, like AWS has this like great framework named well architected framework. And we are like one of the partner able to run this well architected framework where we're going to help the organization in the process to decide what are from a security point of view, for example, or cost point of view, what are the guardrails they should put together, and also how they can improve the workflow and the best practice of the organization to make sure they follow the vision of the company and just not like one small piece of the organization just because they don't have the knowledge, is making any mistake or misconfiguration unexpected. And we are helping every day like companies to make sure they have like a better workflow and to check their workloads and making sure they follow the AWS best practice and the IT organization best practice.
So your team goes to a lot of these certification classes and becomes experts in different parts of the workflow. And that's part of what an organization can take advantage of, is not having to certify all their people in all the areas of AWS. That definitely makes sense. I think that when you think about the types of services that you at TrackIt have really leaned in on, what do they do? Like where are you really building workflows in the cloud currently that are providing a lot of value?
AWS has been like crazy about the number of services they release. Like really my first exposition to AWS, like 2007, 2008, it was 3 services and like S3, EC2, and SQS. So it was really very basic building blocks. And when we started TrackIt in 2014, I think at that time was already 100 services. But these 100 services, they were like still very infrastructure related. There was like your basic building block, how to be like compute type of compute, storage, network, and you are building your infrastructure, but you are not getting yet extra services on the top of it. But now, like of course, all your databases are managed, Elasticsearch cluster are managed, and even your more like sophisticated services like how to live stream or how to transcode, how to manage your fleet of satellites is a service you can get out of one of the, I think it's now 250 services. And actually each service, like EC2, we like the compute instance, I think it's like almost 300 type of instance they have. Same thing in 2007, it was like medium, large, and extra large. But today, it's like you have a lot of different types. So for us, and AWS love to define it that way, we really have 2 superpower, like media and entertainment, because we are based in Los Angeles and we have a strong background in media and entertainment. So media and entertainment can be like very vast. It go like from like ingest to delivery, and also like VFX and AI ML workflow with like computer vision. So and serverless. So that are the 2 services and the 2 verticals we specialized. But of course, we also have like a strong knowledge about base services from AWS.
So do you find that that's the way most companies that have a similar business model to you approach, that they specialize in a specific workflow or a specific vertical?
AWS wants us to specialize that way, and it makes sense because also it's easier to define each system integrator, and sometimes they also love to put system integrator together on different challenges. So yes, we see it more and more, and it was already like the case like 8 years ago when we started the company, but I think now it's even more the case where they love to get us like specialized. And also for us, like everyone in the industry need to know or have a team. We have like a team of 10 DevOps dedicated to base infrastructure, and after we have like a smaller team or bigger team for some specific services. But like you need to know what is an EC2, what is a network, what are the networking components of AWS. Same thing for the security layers. But like not everyone can be like specialized in the SAP service, and we are not, for example, of AWS, but we are very strong on the media pipeline, media supply chain, and everything related to media, what everyone else is not. And same thing for the serverless side on the Lambda and containers.
So when you think about all these services, we haven't talked much about data and storage. I'd like to talk just a little bit about that. So, I think back to the days where we met at DDN, where we had massive storage density in these really high performance storage systems, and that data was not sitting in the cloud. How important is it that customers can get the data out of, let's just use DDN as an example, attached to a supercomputer somewhere, and get that data up into the cloud? Is that happening a lot, or do you find that there's kind of born in cloud data and then there's data center data and the two never shall meet?
Till a few years ago, it was exactly what you said. There was like born in the cloud data and data center data, and they were not really mixing each other. Just with S3, what is very interesting service, people get used to get global data, because if your data in S3 are in Los Angeles, are also available in Paris, and so you have easy way to replicate this data. And having more and more companies joining AWS and deploying workflow in the cloud, maybe in Google Cloud or Azure, people expected the same type of service to get like data, not local anymore, but to get global data. And I think now it's almost like the expectation. And when we talk, for example, in VFX studios with artists, they almost don't understand why their data are not global. So it's definitely like a challenge we see. And so yes, there is definitely like solution to bring and to build. And I think it's where like Hammerspace is like bringing like a building block to solve some of these challenges.
I think you're right that, especially if you're not immersed in the IT field, it's hard to understand with all the capabilities available in the cloud why data couldn't possibly be a global resource. I think that's a really interesting point. And, we all know who spend our days on this, that there's been technology challenges to making that happen. S3 was an interesting innovation, and it's great in its ability to move data between regions. It's cost effective. There's a lot of great things about it, but do you see challenges with it as well?
Yes, definitely. I think I'm in love with S3, and for me, every application should be designed for S3. And I'm talking with like a AWS hoodie here, but what I realize also, S3 is not a standard protocol. Like S3 is only like, of course, there is solution, but you go to Google Cloud or Azure, you don't have S3 implementation, so you need to run MinIO. So S3 is great, but it's global. You can do a lot, but it's proprietary to AWS. Like most of the software who were not born in the cloud, they don't use S3. They don't even know what is S3. So yes, there are a lot of limitation to S3, only by the fact it's like almost only AWS, and it's not implemented everywhere, and it's very far to be supported by everything. So
what do you see the future of that looking like, as there's been so much evolution of the cloud in the last 15 years? Where do you think things will go next? And when you think about really the objective being global data and access to all the innovation that's happening in these services that are increasingly rapidly released, where do you see things going?
If we don't like it, like being a software engineer, like I feel POSIX is like, why we're still using POSIX? But yes, POSIX is still there. And I think like the future, we'll still need POSIX, because like every day, like application and like especially like software is still using like POSIX standards. So and
refactoring everything's not possible, right? I mean, in the end,
unfortunately, well, we're happy to help with it, but yes, it's not. So, and I see like also people get used to it every day. Like we use Dropbox, we use Google Drive, and we get used to have this global data. So when you are in the enterprise world, you don't understand why you have at home with your Dropbox or you Evernote on your phone. You struggle when you use Adobe Premiere or DaVinci Resolve, where you cannot share your data globally. So it's definitely something the artists and the end user are going to expect more and more.
And do you think that global data for these remote workflows or distributed workflows is viable? Will we be able to get to the point where people can live where they want, compute where they want, and use the data wherever it was generated? Is that a viable vision?
Yes, and especially with the mobility today, and we had very good success stories over since COVID actually, where one company, they think they have all the artists in Los Angeles, and finally they realize one guy is in Montana, and it works great. Because the technology is progressing, it's still very like the internet is like it can be still be a bottleneck when you move data from point A to point B, but I still like a lot of new ways, and it's definitely some people they want to tackle this issue, and you still need to understand you have like a physical hardware and networking constraint you need to deal with, but on the software side, I think a lot more application like Hammerspace trying to fix it, and we have been seeing like customer using this type of software layer to fix it and be able to work globally on the same data.
So when you think about folks who are going off to reinvent and they're assessing architectures and strategies for next year, I think it's worth talking about how can you leverage a company like TrackIt. So cloud integrators came about really in the last 10 years or so, I'd say. And I think a lot of what people struggle with is what should their architecture look like? How do I get started? How do I get, the C-suite to agree to a strategy shift? Do you have any pointers on how they can leverage a company like you?
Definitely. Well, first, we are a software engineering team, and we have a lot of software engineers. So we know how to talk to software engineers. And the same way on the IT side, so we can really help to bridge the gap between the different departments, between executives, IT team, and software engineering team, to make sure they understand each other, because most of the time it's a challenge to understand like between the IT mindset and the software engineering mindset, what should be the workflow, how it should work, because they don't have the same expectations. But so that is a very good way to use us as a company, just to make sure to assess and to help everyone to work together. Also, we talk about migration. Like if you move a workflow, and usually when you go to reinvent for the first time, it's what you have in mind. Say, oh yes, I have this workflow running on-prem, how I should move it to AWS. And using like a partner like TrackIt with access to the migration acceleration tools from AWS, it's a great way to do it, because we can help you to understand the better way to migrate your application to AWS or the cloud in general. And usually you don't want to do a lift and shift, because it's definitely a different paradigm between on-prem and AWS and how you should do it. So by default, for example, when you are going to go in the cloud, you are going to hear a lot of serverless. Yes, it's the best way to do serverless. Can you do it? Maybe not, but at least you should try to look at it. And it's really where we can help with, because you want totally to, for cost reasons mostly, just to do a lift and shift and say, oh yes, I have like 100 servers on-prem. I'm going to create 100 EC2 instance. You don't want to do that, because it's a recipe for failure.
Failure and expensive if you get all of that
Yes.
running all at once.
Yes.
So while you're in Las Vegas, if folks are interested in chatting with you, where might they find you, or how can they get in contact with you?
Yes, I will. So also something to remember about reInvent. It's a huge conference. So my point about it is like really to focus on very few locations. So I will be mostly at the Venetian and at the Anchor. So it will be like, and most of the session I will go to, it will be mostly at the Venetian. So try to focus on that. But yes, I will be at the Venetian, so you can find me there. Also, I will be at the Hammerspace suite at the Anchor. So it's where the two places I will spend most of my time.
Hey, Ludo, thank you for joining today. I think it's interesting as we have this podcast and folks are constantly struggling with the move to the cloud, the move of data, how do they support their global resources? Often we talk in this podcast kind of about the aspirational business goals of all this, and being able to delve into implementation, the reality of the complexity of all the choices available is something that our audience has been asking for. And I thought you'd be a perfect guest for this. So I appreciate you jumping on, sharing just a bit of the knowledge that you and your team have. And certainly for those who are listening to this show, Ludo's pretty easy to find either at TrackIt. Is it trackit.com or What is your website?
TrackIt.io. Ludo at TrackIt.io.
I thought so. Or on LinkedIn. And great company to help you as you're sorting through some of the challenges of your cloud journey. For this episode, I thank you for joining. And Ludo, thank you for being a guest.
Thank you for having me, and looking forward to see everyone in a few weeks at re:Invent.
Thanks for listening to Data Unchained, powered by Hammerspace. To learn more, visit hammerspace.com. If you have a guest you would like to hear on the show, email me at molly@hammerspace.com.